It is time to check in as we do this time of the afternoon on the race to the White House. We've, of course, got a campaign well underway here in Australia, but a campaign still underway in the United States, which has even longer to run. Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker are with me. And, Bruce, I want to start with you. Before we get to Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Barack Obama, this is a pretty significant trip and one of these bookending foreign policy tours for him. Vietnam, and then he goes to Hiroshima as well. He's the third president to go to Vietnam, but the first who'll be going to Hiroshima since the atomic bomb was dropped in 1945. And he's just announced in a speech in Hanoi that they are lifting an arms embargo on Vietnam. It's, again, a poignant reflection of how much has changed in this relationship. Vietnam now pretty important to the United States as it looks at this region and China's actions in the South China Sea as well. But pretty sensitive issues he'll be dealing with in both Vietnam and at Hiroshima as well.
Indeed, and of course in Vietnam and in Japan you have two of China's most trenchant critics, certainly in the past. China invaded Vietnam on more than one occasion, the last time being I think in about 1979, albeit briefly. So they've got their big issues with each other, and of course doing a deal around arms is probably sending a pretty powerful message to the Chinese that they're not done with in East Asia by any stretch of the imagination. Similarly with Japan, I mean Japan and China have got a very, very difficult past arising out of the Second World War. You don't have to get a conversation going too long before it gets animated in China if you start discussing the Japanese. So in some ways, there's a lot of politics involved in the choice of of the countries that he's visiting, but it's also fraught with difficulties.
With Japan, Grahame, we know Japan and the United States have a very close relationship, no doubt about that. But this is still one of those issues, isn't it? Hiroshima and the dropping of the bomb. The Japanese have always wanted an apology for that. The White House make it pretty clear he's not going to apologise on this visit.
No. It'd be quite stupid to apologise. But, look, he will be warmly welcomed in both countries. But all he's got to do is talk about North Korea, and he'll have a captive audience. And everyone will nod, yes, we've got to do something about North Korea. And I reckon that'll be half his message, is, hey, we need stability in this region. The way to do that is for China to behave itself and for North Korea to pull its head in. And both countries will say, yep. Yeah,
and that backdrop of Hiroshima, I was there last year, actually. It is still just so shocking to see the impact that an atomic weapon or a nuclear weapon can have. So, yeah, an important, powerful backdrop for that sort of message. Just on the campaign over there, I want to ask you about Bernie Sanders. Bruce, he's still going, he's still in the race. Some commentary, though, that, yes, he's made his point and he's given a voice to the left of the Democrat Party, to the working class. But is he in danger of damaging some of the ground and some of the good that he's done for that constituency by hanging in there and continuing in this race?
I think there is a prospect that he could slow Hillary Clinton's movement into the main game, which is obviously taking on Trump. Look, he's got no prospect of being the presidential nominee now. He should withdraw, and I think a lot of Americans are saying he should do that. It's like he's becoming a perpetual oppositionist now, which is really his history in politics. He was not even a member of the Democratic Party in the Congress. He was on the Senate. He was a
proud socialist.
They don't even do that in the Labor Party anymore. And but of course he's proved to be extremely successful in that role. But no, he should be out now, but I don't see any real signs of him withdrawing any time soon, unfortunately.
No, he's not. But Grahame, the point here is this isn't necessarily a slam dunk for Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump. I mean, the polls show they're pretty tight. She needs as much clear air as she can get on the Democrat side.
Well, that's true. And he's going to do all right in California coming up. But he is a problem for Australia and for other people. There are very good people in Australia who had hoped that once you get rid of this stupid pre-selection or primary season, that both candidates would move towards the middle. And people who deal with leaders and foreign affairs, people all around the world in Australia, they say that is the hope. They were wondering whether or not Trump had the ability to move towards the middle, but they thought Hillary Clinton would move towards the middle. But Bernie Sanders may well stop her. If she has to adopt some of his cockamamie sort of ideas, it will hamper her ability to shift towards the middle, which is where I think most people would like to see her go if she's up against Trump.
And you make a good point as far as Australia's national interest is concerned, things like the big trade deal, the TPP, other issues as well. Look, let's turn to the Australian campaign. Grahame, let me get to you first, Grahame, on this one. The polls, we're seeing a lot of polls, obviously an election campaign, but they do matter during an election campaign, and they still have the coalition behind, just 49-51. The general consensus, I think, has been Turnbull will still win, he's still likely to win, but is that changing? Do you think there's some starting to think, well, maybe Labor could win this?
Look, I'll get to the Australian political drama in a moment, but David, there's quite a few in the political game who are just as interested in your dramas at home.
We're all okay.
What's happened?
We're all okay. Yeah, no. We've had some issues with our little 2-year-old over the last couple of weeks, but I'm very glad to be back at work, which means that she is doing particularly well and out of hospital very soon. So thank you, Grahame. But everything's okay.
Good on her. Now polls. Look, we are back to where we thought we would be. Very even. It is a little bit different on the ground, and it's very patchy around the marginal seats. Look, could Labor win it? Well, if everything went right for 5 weeks, they could get closer. I cannot find 19 seats that the Labor Party would need to govern in its own right. At best, if Bill Shorten grows wings, gets a halo, and Malcolm Turnbull falls into a pigsty, he goes close to having to govern with the world's ugliest independents, Greens and everyone else, that sort of ugly government again. But look, he's doing better.
Yeah, a lot's got to go right.
Because any opposition leader who is still standing at the end of the day gets marks because, expectations are so low. But look, he's doing all right.
Yeah, well,
but I genuinely think, here we are at the end of the second week of the campaign. And last week I was talking about, what's it mean in cricket analogy? In soccer, I reckon it is roughly, early in the game, it's 0-0 still, that the coalition nearly scored with Peter Dutton, but the follow-up was a bit poor. And the Labor Party nearly scored an own goal with David Feeney, who has gone into the concussion box because he couldn't remember where he lived or how many houses he owned. And apart from that, not a lot has cut through.
I'm sure David Feeney will keep his regular spot here on PM Agenda later this week. I'm absolutely sure of that. But I think you're right about the 0-0 score. Bruce, on this question of whether Labor can win, as you well know, it comes down to winning enough of those marginal seats. How do you think they are looking? Which ones do you think are likely to change hands at the moment?
Well, I'm hesitant to nominate particular seats, but I can talk in terms of regions. In Queensland is obviously a very important part of this election campaign for Labor because about 3 of the most marginal seats are up there. Regional Queensland, seats like Capricornia, you would think would be a prospect because in many ways Turnbull and Turnbull's style of politics doesn't really suit regional Australia. Regional Australia is feeling the pinch in a way that metropolitan Australia probably is not. So far north Queensland's an issue. The Northern Territory, where there's a very ordinary CLP government, they think that there's a real prospect of picking up Solomon. In the West, it's a bit more complicated because, the most marginal of the Liberal seats, it comes in at about 4.5%, I think. So that's above the number that Labor needs in order to win government in its own right. In South Australia, I don't think the government's handled the whole boats, the issue of the shipbuilding particularly well, particularly when Abbott was there. It's been retrieved somewhat by Turnbull. So wherever you go, there are regional issues which are going to be a significant factor in this election campaign. So perhaps it's best to look in terms of regions rather than just in terms of particular marginal seats. Because
but are there enough winnable marginals there for for Labor, for Bill Shorten to actually win the election? I mean, at this stage, I know there's still a long way to go here, but, you know, if you're looking at 3 in Queensland, 1 in Northern Territory, maybe 1 or 2 in other parts, it's still not enough.
Oh, I think there's more seats potentially in the mix there just on the basis of the swing. You see, the swing that's required for Labor to win in its own right is 4%. Well, compared to some of the swings we've been seeing in state elections in recent times, that's absolutely nothing. So on a good day, Labor is, I think, in a very good position to, you know, to score a surprise win. However, history would certainly be telling us that that's not likely. But a lot of it, I think, is going to come down to whether Turnbull can start to fire. And right now, he is not firing. I think he's got a huge authenticity problem. He came in, you know, to take Graham's analogy, you know, they thought that they were getting a Pele when he came along, and it really got the under-15C side, or the captain of them. That's really what we're seeing in Turnbull at the moment, and it's got a lot of people scratching their heads.
Now, just in terms of, I want to ask you both, and Grahame, you first, the ground game. I mean, we see the national campaign, we see what the leaders are doing, and yes, when they're in a marginal seat, we see that. But what's happening in all of these marginals away from the national spotlight right now?
It's different. You know, what we see on the national television is the Prime Minister saying he's got a plan, Bill Shorten saying he's got some stuff too. But on the ground, they're announcing a bit of an extension to the hospital, a bit of money for the local road, a little bit here for a preschool. You know, they're stuff where the candidate, when the leader leaves, then there's a picture in the local media of the candidate, the leader, and a story about the local hospital, the local road, and that is just priceless stuff. And all of these seats are very, very different. You know, I think Bruce is right. It's very hard to tell at the moment which seats. But you could say, look, maybe one, you know, these are the big ones in danger at the moment. 1 in Perth, 1, maybe 2 in South Australia, only 2 in Tasmania. Could be a net nothing in Victoria because there's a couple of seats there Libs could win, as well as a couple they could lose. Then you're back to the ring around Sydney and Queensland. And each of those is different. Even some of those ethnic seats in Western Sydney are very different. And people say, oh, Peter Dutton, shock horror. What Peter Dutton was saying is exactly what Western Sydney is saying, where they're saying, hey, we queued up to come to this fantastic country and we've fitted in, and some of these people that you know want to come in through the back door or come from strange countries or come from the wrong part of our country, we don't want them here. You know, it's you know, this ethnic thing and refugee thing and illegal migrant thing in some of these seats is very important.
Yeah, can I say one of the things that's a challenge for the parties in this campaign is the length of the campaign. So it's always difficult to be able to spread, you know, the mix of policies over a 33, you know, 40-day campaign, let alone a 55-day campaign. That's obviously one of the big issues that they've got at the moment. They are really talking about state issues. I mean, the Prime Minister over in the West today talking about rail links. I mean, that's the sort of, Bill Shorten. So that's the sort of thing that we're seeing, you know, play out at the moment. That they're really talking about local issues. Now that can be of assistance, but I think we're going to see this campaign ramp up after the 33-day mark is hit. About a month out from the election day, we're going to see a change in tone and I think a change in pace from the campaign.
All right, well,
I agree.
Grahame, let me just pick up on what you're saying. You think what Peter Dutton said last week is something that the government should be hammering more in some of these marginal seats?
Yes, I do. And you can see the problem the Labor Party is in when it's raised. And it resonates in many of those marginal seats, some of which are Labor seats.
Okay, but some in government have said to me they worried about a backlash because he wasn't just talking about people coming on boats and there's bipartisanship that people coming on boats is not a good idea. He was talking about those coming through a legitimate refugee intake, through the humanitarian intake.
I understand that, but we have in the past made a few mistakes with some people who were not even educated in their own country and still have trouble. You know, The Sudanese, for example, have been a real problem when they've come in. Now, Peter Dutton was actually right, and most thinking people knew he was right, and certainly from these ethnic communities, he's right.
We've got to go. We're right out of time, but I'm sorry, Bruce. I'm sure we'll come back to this. We'll talk to you both next week. Always good to catch up with the two of you, Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker. Thank you very much for that. Quick